Hey everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm Lauren Kalil with The Bottom Line. Today we are talking about the recent announcement. CrossFit came out with almost all of the semifinal events for the 2022 game season. On the show today, we have Brian Friend, Patrick Clark, Tommy Marquez. We are breaking it down, initial thoughts, what we think about some of the key points. Let's go around and first start with what we think when we saw this list. Brian, we'll start with you.
Um, okay. It's a lot of the same competitions as last year. I think that in my opinion, there's a couple of things that I don't love about it. I know that we have this basically the same format as last year with 4 weeks for semifinals, a 2-week gap, and then the last chance qualifier. Personally, I don't like that length of time for the semifinal qualification process. I think that there's a much more succinct and clean way that you could potentially do it. And I was, hopeful that they might consider some of those things this season. Just to be like very kind of brief about it, the Open and quarterfinals takes about 5 weeks, which is what traditionally has always been to get to the semifinal stage, which used to be the regional stage. There's about a 2-month gap between that end of the quarterfinals, start of the semifinals. But then this year, the semifinals begin on May 20th. And if you include the last chance qualifiers as a part of the semifinals, which is how they're listed on the game's website, then it extends all the way until July 1st. And so you have basically over a month gap between when the first and last people will be qualifying for the CrossFit Games. And I think that for a variety of reasons, there's a way that we could be potentially implementing a format here that could be 2 weeks long and have everyone qualify within that 2-week window, and then give everyone who does qualify for the CrossFit Games at least 2 months to then prepare for the next stage. So you'd have open quarterfinals, 2-month preparation, semifinals, 2-month preparation, games, which seems more uniform across the board to me. So that's one of the things that I noticed at first.
Why do you think there isn't that part of the season isn't so condensed? Why do you think they spread it out over a course of 4 weeks? Any idea?
Tommy might have more experience with this, having been parts of conversations with HQ over the years. The regional season used to be, similarly, it was usually 3 weeks long. There's tons of different things in play here. 4 weeks long for regionals as well. Yeah, so there's tons of different. Used to be as long as 5. So it could be just, that's kind of how it's always been type thing. One of the things that I also think about is, to me, from CrossFit's perspective, semifinals could be another like big ticket item to potentially sell to a broadcast or something like that. And if you have a 2 weeks, and what I mean by 2 weeks is you choose 5 semifinals 1 week and 5 the other, that take place around the globe. So you start in Australia, maybe you have Africa, one of the Europe, an East Coast of North America, and a West Coast of North America. So the timeline lines up. And then obviously they've had this in the past with regionals where there's someone at a central location that can bring you up to date on what's happened while you were sleeping in other parts of the world. And then you do the same thing the next week. And I think that might be something that's easy to sell. I think athletes would like it because I think it would be appealing to athletes to know that, whether I'm week 1 or week 2, it's only a week difference. And then I know 2 months out that I have time to prepare for this. And obviously this year also, and last year as well, with all the different regulations surrounding COVID restrictions and travel, having 2 months to prepare is going to be appealing for athletes when it comes to getting visas and arranging everything that needs to be arranged with sponsors, et cetera, to try to, compete in a way that makes sense for them financially, logistically, et cetera, at the CrossFit Games.
And we'll get into some of those restrictions and locations with shutdowns in just a bit. But Tommy, let's go to you for first initial thoughts of semifinals.
Well, it's interesting to see a couple new events join into the mix. I kind of assumed after, the ongoing pandemic threw a few knuckleballs at some event organizers last year that we might see some turnover, particularly in some of the up and coming continents of the world where maybe, the competition setting isn't as developed as far as events are concerned. So to see the Far East Throwdown as a relatively new event coming out of Korea. I've heard of it before. I don't know if this is completely new. I may have heard another variation of this event from the past. And then the Copa Sur one coming out of South America. Those are both the real newcomers. I was actually pleasantly surprised to see the Atlas Games back in the mix after a year away. They were they were kind of the unfortunate, I guess, crossbearers for the brunt of the pandemic when things shut down, because they were the ones that were basically at 24 hours away from starting when everything locked down. And I don't need to go too far into it, but being that event doesn't help your bottom line whatsoever, and it makes it very difficult to even continue to exist. And having had conversations with those event organizers, that was a very difficult process for them. So to see them be able to rebound and be able to be a semifinal coming forward and representing Canada, I think is a big step forward, considering that we had 2 Canadians on the podium at the CrossFit Games this last year. We just got off a Wadapalooza event where the men's podium was swept by Canada, and I think that we're starting to see a stronger Canadian presence across the board. And so I think it's good that we have an event representing them. There's one big elephant in the room, but I'm sure we'll address that later. But those are just kind of the first ones of, hey, who is actually here. The way I approach a party is I analyze who's here first, and then I analyze who is.
So Brian brought up the point that he doesn't like how the semifinals are extended over the course of a month. What are your thoughts on that? You kind of have a different opinion and take on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a few things to consider, and Brian brought up some great points. When you start to consider the media output, the sponsorship element of it, the organizational element of it, generally speaking, condensing those things makes it a much heavier lift across the board. And I wouldn't be surprised. I would actually love to see in the future, as things get going and the wheels on the semifinals system and everything gets going in full steam, it actually go back to maybe 3 weeks. Because I think what we saw after a decade of the Open, a condensed format, is something that a lot of people are looking for. But I think right now what we're looking at is only a handful of events got to go live last year. We're asking a lot of events to try and do a live event in the midst of constantly changing restrictions. So ultimately giving a little bit of a wider strike zone for these events, and it's very possible that we could see events slide left or right depending on what these other 2 North American semifinals get set. I don't know exactly what is in the contract, but having a week or 2 here or there as a buffer in this uncertain time, I think provides a little bit of leeway for broadcast partners, for sponsorship partners. It also spreads them out a little bit wider, which if you have anything to do with games partners and sponsors and things like that, they're going to enjoy seeing their product across 4 weeks of competition rather than 3. I'm not saying that needs to be an exact driver of it, but those are all certainly things to keep in mind of, particularly with events in other continents where even things like getting equipment there might be an issue. And so we have to, I think in the long run, maybe something more condensed would be great as far as like fairness of competition for sure. But I think defaulting to a 4-week system that's relatively familiar here as we try to get this full breadth of semifinals off the ground seems like the safe play, if that makes sense.
Pat, let's go to you. Initial thoughts.
Well, I think the initial thought I have is probably the elephant in the room is that we're missing 2 North American semifinals. Obviously, the West Coast and Granite Games, who we thought were slotted in those positions, and backed out, or maybe we don't know. We don't know if they're coming back or not. Right now, it's kind of unknown, or if they're going to be 2 completely new semifinals. We don't know. We do know that the announcement was supposed to come out last Monday, but it got delayed, and in part, we think that it got delayed because of Loud and Live's announcement, or Matt O'Keefe's announcement, that he's stepping down as president of Loud and Live Sports. So, there's some correlation there. But just having those 2 unknowns for North America, which, it's not it's athletes are probably wondering, where they can go or what options are out there. And it only gives, if they are new, if they are going to be 2 new semifinals, it only gives them less than 5 months to prepare for it. So, so it's got to be, if they are new semifinals, it's got to be someone that already has the logistics and infrastructure in place. And there's not many out there. Me and Tommy, we've discussed a couple options, and it just wouldn't make any sense right now. So that's the thing that initially jumped out at me, were what's not there.
And I think another big elephant in the room is obviously travel restrictions. What happens if some of these events end up going online again, and when athletes are being seated to specific locations, how that impacts whether they end up on the competition floor or not. I mean, just off the bat, Tommy brought it up. We look at the CrossFit Atlas Games and we know that, I mean, they are probably pretty likely to end up going to virtual. What are some of your thoughts on, looking at this list and actually giving athletes the opportunity to compete in person?
I'll go here. I agree with Tommy that Canada is fully deserving of a semifinal, and I was there with him, at the Atlas Games when everything kind of came to a grinding halt out of nowhere, and I know very well the financial implications and struggles that they've had as a result of that. And I would love to see them be able to host an event, but I just don't have the confidence that it's going to happen based on the politics in Canada. And in the meantime, we've seen that there are places throughout the United States that are capable of hosting events, and that Canadians are capable of traveling to those events. So something that while I would love to have a live competition in Canada, if CrossFit's not confident that Canada can host a live competition, I think that they should have been forthright in announcing and saying, we want to honor the fact that the Canadian CrossFit community is strong, and that even at the top level, they're very, very good, and we want to give them a semifinal. But for this season, because we want to have the opportunity to host as many online semifinals in person as we can, we're either going to host the Atlas Games in the United States and still title it the Atlas Games, or we're going to just bookmark the Atlas Games until next season, and when we hope that we can be able to have a live competition in Canada and give the best opportunity for all the semifinals in North America to happen in the same manner, which would be live competition. In some of the other examples, like Korea or South Africa, where there might also be some limitations, the kind of silver lining, if there is one there, if they have to go online, is that there's only one semifinal. So then you don't run into the problem of having some athletes who want to compete live not have the opportunity, or who want to compete on live not have that opportunity. So I would like to see some initiative from CrossFit to try to instill a level of consistency, if not everywhere, at least by continent.
Yeah, I think that's where the country managers come into play. So you look at taking a step back from that statement just for a second. I think the Mid-Atlantic, the MAC, in many ways has been a standard bearer for a lot of competitions in terms of flexibility, organization, and how they've handled things. You look at the way they were able to move to Knoxville, Tennessee, adjust their timeline and their schedule accordingly, and now they're going back to Knoxville, and they've actually created a relatively new home. Now, maybe Atlas wants to borrow that playbook for just a year because they do want to end up in Canada. But I also think that, like Brian said, there is an opportunity to be forthcoming, as you mentioned. But also, you look at what CrossFit Canada is putting out on a regular basis for their athletes. After the announcement went out, CrossFit Canada made a post about the Atlas Games. They gave a download link for the Atlas Games app to provide direct updates to people as well. And I think in conjunction with CrossFit, I think there's an opportunity for CrossFit Canada to take a lead there and instill some trust around communication for the specific country managers, because I think that's part of what they're trying to build as far as infrastructure is concerned. So being able to rely on those regionally specific managers to distribute information, work on the ground floor, to be able to talk with the event organizers, and then be able to allow CrossFit at the top to provide the most distilled and pertinent information globally across everyone else. Now that's asking a lot, and who knows who's to say what that process will look like in this year. But I do think as Brian said, there's an opportunity to be very forthcoming about this. I do think there's probably a contingency plan in place to maybe make that adjustment as well. But I think we're just a couple of days, 2 days away from the announcement and being posted on social media. So it's possible that maybe in the coming weeks that we start to see those lines of communication get laid out.
Patrick, let's wrap it up with you.
Yeah, I mean, what they said in terms of, the MAC kind of has the playbook to that, and hopefully, I know last year a lot of those semifinal organizers they were on weekly, not weekly calls, but they're on calls with each other. So hopefully that line of communications there, and some of those organizers are helping out someone like the Atlas Games, or even these newer events, helping them along, because semifinals are only as successful as if they're all successful. You can't just have one that's the cream of the crop and all the other ones kind of floundering. So hopefully that communication, as long as communications with those country managers, and it's got to be a team effort altogether. These semifinals do not work individually; they work together as teams, and they're only successful if they're all be pulled off successfully at the same. And they all thrive, and all athletes can make it, and these athletes deserve live competitions. They do, and it'd be a shame, especially for the Canadian contingent, if they didn't have one. So.
Plenty of questions that time will tell us what happens with some of these locations. We have a couple months of wiggle room, and we are still waiting to hear what those other two North American semifinal locations will be. But let's go around. What is the bottom line for everyone on the release of the semifinals?
Oh, I guess I'm a negative person today, but I just wasn't. It seems like on the back of the, decision surrounding Dave and the announcement from Justin Berg about wanting to be very forthright in communication, that there were a lot of things missing in terms of communication in this announcement. To announce two semifinals that are unknown and not to give any kind of explanation is inviting criticism. To announce the semifinals and have nothing surrounding the prize purse when you know that everyone wants to know, are you going to increase the prize purse there, is inviting criticism. So I would have liked to see some of those things addressed in conjunction with this announcement, and really be the first action step of them being more forthright in communication as they say they want to be.
Well, if you do remember, Brian, there was comments made publicly about the prize purse in the community-wide email that was sent out in the public statements by Justin Berg. Just to kind of play devil's advocate here, and be a ray of shining positivity, he did say that
I like the balance of you two.
Justin did say that the next communication that would be received from HQ would be, or home office, or whatever they're called now, would be semifinal announcements, followed shortly thereafter by prize purse money. So he did lay out a specific order of events for that, which I actually think is a drastic improvement. Just the fact that there's an email being sent out like that, kind of laying out what some of the steps for. I go back and forth on this, as far as what Brian said a little bit about having some absent information as far as events are concerned. On one hand, obviously we'd like to know everything, but I also do think that you're in a weird spot here where you either announce that what the semifinals are, let everyone know and start to get the wheels turning, even in the absence of two events, or I don't really know what the other option is outside of holding that information back, and then you're effectively holding the other 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 semifinals hostage, because two events or two events at the last minute maybe dropped out or stepped back from a possible semifinal spot. That's really kind of a weird position to be in. If I'm planning and I have 80% of the information that I can provide to you, it's still better to me than giving 0% and giving some level of ambiguous information, because that 20% decided to step away. And we don't know the details around that other 20%. It's possible that there's just a reevaluation of sorts going on. But I think in the very least, getting some of this information out there for a lot of these athletes, organizers, brands, particularly because they're new events, I think that is important for events like Far East Throwdown, like Copa Sur. Strength and Depth would be fine. They're a phenomenal event. They've been around for forever. But for those other events to start to be able to say, hey, we're semifinals, let's go to brands, let's show them, let's start to generate money. That's also an important revenue generator for having that stamp, at least publicly, even if there are two events missing.
Yeah, my bottom line, probably it's kind of similar to what Brian was saying. Is it's more from the athlete perspective. Now they have locations. they have dates, -2, but also that communication that there is going to be something, an announcement regarding prize purse. And I know from an athlete standpoint, especially talking to a bunch of them at Wadapalooza, the professionalization of sport, they need higher prize monies. They need to pay out maybe more positions in that top, besides the top 5 as well. But hopefully that next announcement. So the bottom line is, for me, is basically we need more information, and that's not only from media, but for any of the athletes that are planning on competing in them.
And as we get that information, we will be sure to let you guys know. But thank you, Brian, Tommy, and Patrick, for your input. Initial thoughts on the release of the semifinals location. We'll have more info to come. We'll see you guys next time.